I have to look at it now is if they can do 80% of what I can do, that's amazing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, 80% of the invoicing properly.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? If I get that we could have squeezed 20% more out of giving them a quote or something like that. But 80% of the time, if the trucks are perfectly clean, that's good enough. 20% of the time, if they're a little dirty, it's not the end of the world. And so that 80% rule is like shooting for an employees or team members to get it most of the time. 80% is like kind of the target instead of like 95, 100% that I kind of hold myself to that standard.
Yeah, we do an exercise called the 80-20 rule, especially for management and leadership. So it's I take it the first 10, they take it 80, and then I finish off the last 10. And so a lot of the times people don't want to make mistakes. So they don't want to go the whole 100% because there might be a small edit that you want to make. And so then out the door, there's a different.
Give us an example of that. Can you give us an example of that?
Yeah. So, okay, you got to put a quote together for the client. Okay. So here's how I'm going to take it the first 10. We got this quote. It's downtown. Okay. Make sure you have the travel time. Make sure you got the lifts on this truck, this and that. I want you to go through all the material lists. I want to set the standard. So I want to say, make sure you call 3 different suppliers, get the pricing out there, put the quote together, package it up, ready to go. Okay. So that's just me. I spent 5 minutes, right? They're going to go out there. They're going to spend 2 hours putting this estimate together. They're going to call around. They're going to do all this groundwork. And then they're going to come back to me for the final 10. And that final 10 is just the fine tweaks. Okay, this is what I found. I just want clarification. This is what I do. Okay, perfect. Now I've seen the last 10%. I've put my seal of approval on it. They're happy because they're either in the right path, with the right direction, or they're not. And then we can tweak it. So next time, and again, this isn't micromanaging. This is supporting the outcome that you're looking for, right? And then every time they feel empowered because they're doing most of the work. Again, talking about perfectionism. If they're almost great, they're great, right?
Yeah.
So
let's celebrate that almost.
They're almost
yeah.
great.
So
I like
you're not drilling into them. Oh, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? You're saying, oh, great job. So yes, and. Right? Yes, that's great. And then you just add to it. Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good
exactly.
example.
You don't want to be doing but. So it's like, the yes and's a really powerful statement. So that's kind of our 80-20 rule. And the team knows that.
Well, that's your rule for delegation, it sounds like. 80-20 rule is all about delegation.
Well,
right?
and I would also say that most tasks, most of it can be done with somebody. The bulk of the work, like you were saying, can be done by somebody who's not an expert at that. Right? They can take on a bulk of the work away from the person who is an expert. So a perfect example of that is when we're doing Christmas light quotes, we may get 100, 200 leads in a day. Right? I mean, it's crazy. It's so seasonal, and it's the toughest thing to staff and train for that seasonal spike. But what we can do for our quoting is, anybody can be trained to answer the phone and get the client's information and set up that process and say, okay, awesome. It sounds good. Sounds like we're on the same page. We're going to get you a quote within 24 hours. And then what we can do there is I can have an army of people finding a photo, doing the design, because we're doing the same design on every house. In Jobber, we can look at that photo, that design photo, and we do a text-only line item. That's just the photo for design. And then underneath that, based upon that photo, we give line items that correlate to how they marked up that design. Now, the difficult part of sending the quote is looking at that house, and is that 150 feet of lights or is that 170 feet of lights? Well, that requires a much higher level of expertise than just putting a circle. If there's a triangle, put a big circle right there that is going to be a wreath. The front roof lines, put a red line on that. Anybody can do that, but not everybody can look at that house and accurately measure it. So to your point, I can have an army of people getting the client's information, making the design photo, adding the line items, save that line item as a draft in Jobber, and then I can have my expert go through and spend 30 seconds a quote.
Signing off.
Signing off, but more so adding the pricing. And then once that person gets caught up, that is that entry-level quoter, that person, once they get caught up on themselves, we say, hey, all right, you're getting real good at doing the design photo. You're getting good at putting the line items on properly. Now I want you to take a stab at coming up with an estimate and still save it as a draft. But then, we're going to talk about it before we click send. We're going to talk about it together. And before you know it, you give somebody, like you're saying, 6 months for a manager. Well, now I can give somebody, they can be efficient almost day 2 or day 3. They can be they can be a net positive to the team, but I can give them a month to become an expert at quoting. So some of those bulk tasks can be done by somebody who doesn't quite have to be an expert if you say 80% is good enough.